What's up, party people? It's Keys Dan with RadioWhat.com, DJLittleRock.com, coming to you live in living color from the Radio What studios. And this is my podcast, What Makes You Smarter. It's an extension of the RadioWhat.com internet radio station that I've been running for quite some time. And if you need DJ services, where do you go? DJLittleRock.com. Check availability and get a free price quote. And maybe you can have me at your next event. Maybe. I hope so. I like to play for the people. If you would like to tell your story, I encourage you to check out my other podcast, What Makes You Famous. Find it everywhere using the hashtag What Makes You Famous. But for today, let's learn together on what makes you smarter. Now, on with the show. Today on the program, 10 things you need to know today for Thursday, March 19th, 2020. 10 things you need to know today. Number 1, Trump signs first coronavirus aid package. President Trump has signed a bipartisan spending package to provide sick leave for many Americans forced to stay home from work due to the COVID-19 coronavirus pandemic. The legislation, which the Senate approved in a 90-8 vote on Wednesday after earlier approval in the House, also covers free COVID-19 testing and other food and medical aid. 8 Republican senators voted against the bill, even though Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, Republican Kentucky, advised them Wednesday to, quote, gag and vote for it anyway, end quote. GOP and the White House priorities, including bailouts for the airline industry and possibly direct payments to Americans, are expected in a second aid package. This is according to USA Today and the New York Times. Number 2, Sanders to assess campaign after latest losses to Biden. Senator Bernie Sanders, Independent Vermont, will assess his 2020 presidential campaign after losing 3 more Democratic presidential primaries on Tuesday. His campaign manager, Faiz Shakir, said Wednesday, quote, the next primary contest is at least 3 weeks away, end quote, Shakir said. Quote, Senator Sanders is going to be having conversations with supporters to assess his campaign, end quote. On Tuesday, former Vice President Joe Biden doubled his delegate lead with wins in Florida, Illinois, and Arizona, putting him closer to locking up the party's nomination to challenge President Trump in November. Shakir said that in the, quote, immediate term, end quote, Sanders was focusing, quote, on the government response to the coronavirus outbreak and ensuring that we take care of working people and the most vulnerable, end quote. This is according to NBC News. Number 3, Trump invokes wartime authority to order factory production. President Trump on Wednesday invoked his emergency authority under the Defense Production Act to enable him to compel industries to increase production of essential materials needed in the fight against the COVID-19 coronavirus, including medical supplies and much-needed ventilators. Quote, it's a war, end quote, Trump said, declaring himself to be a, quote, wartime president, end quote. Trump, who said he wasn't using the emergency powers just yet, made the announcement as economic damage from the pandemic expanded. With Detroit's big 3 automakers shutting down their North American factories, the virus now has infected more than 9,400 in the United States, killing 150. Trump also said the Department of Housing and Urban Development would suspend all foreclosures and evictions until the end of April. This is according to the Associated Press. Number 4, stocks continue to fall, erasing gains since Trump took office. Trading on the New York Stock Exchange was once again halted on Wednesday as stocks plummeted, and the Dow Jones Industrial Average officially erased nearly all of its gains since President Trump was inaugurated. The Dow on Wednesday fell below 19,732 points, the number it closed at the day before Trump's inauguration in January of 2017, as the S&P 500 fell 7%, trading on the New York Stock Exchange was halted for 15 minutes. This is the fourth time the stock market circuit breaker has triggered a suspension in trading this month amid the escalating coronavirus crisis. Quote, stocks are crashing, commodities are crashing, and oil prices are crashing, end quote, said Chris Brightman of research affiliates. Quote, fear has gripped markets, end quote. This is according to the Washington Post and CNN. Number 5, 2 congressmen test positive for coronavirus. Representative Mario Diaz-Balart, Republican, Florida, and Representative Ben McAdams, Democrat, Utah, announced on Wednesday that they had tested positive for the COVID-19 coronavirus. They are the first members of Congress to contract the virus. Diaz-Balart's office said he developed symptoms including a fever and headache on Saturday evening and was notified on Wednesday that he tested positive for COVID-19. In a statement, Diaz-Balart said he is, quote, feeling much better, end quote, and urged the public to, quote, take this seriously, end quote. McAdams said he has been in self-quarantine since the weekend and is, quote, doing my part as all Americans are doing to contain the spread of the virus and mitigate the coronavirus outbreak, end quote. This is according to Politico and the Salt Lake Tribune. Number 6, 5.7 magnitude earthquake hits Utah. A 5.7 magnitude earthquake struck Salt Lake City, Utah, early Wednesday, forcing the state's public health laboratory to halt work despite the coronavirus crisis. The quake knocked out power to tens of thousands of people and forced Salt Lake International Airport to divert flights, while workers inspect runways to make sure they weren't damaged. The temblor was the strongest to hit the state since a magnitude 5.9 quake in 1992. Quote, please stay away from the downtown area while crews assess damage, end quote, Governor Gary Herbert said via Twitter. Quote, unless you work in public safety or are an essential employee, remain at home or telework, end quote. This is according to CNN. Number 7, New Zealand decriminalizes abortion. New Zealand lawmakers voted 68-51 on Wednesday to decriminalize abortion and allow women access to the procedure in early pregnancy. The law will take effect a day after the Governor General, Queen Elizabeth II's representative in the country, grants royal assent, which is considered a formality. New Zealand was one of the last wealthy nations still barring abortion in the first half of pregnancy, although officials say no woman has ever been prosecuted in the country for terminating an early pregnancy. Amy Adams, a former justice minister and National Party lawmaker, said the old law, enacted in 1977, was, quote, outdated and incredibly paternalistic, end quote, and put women seeking abortions through unfair delays and social marginalization. This is according to the New Zealand Herald and the New York Times. Number 8, China reports no new local coronavirus infections for first time during outbreak. China on Thursday reported no new local COVID-19 coronavirus infections for the first time since the pandemic began 3 months ago. China did report 34 new cases, all patients who entered China from other countries. After originally mismanaging the outbreak, residents complained of a lack of food and hospital beds, and even punishing doctors who tried to spread the word. China enforced quarantines and shut down factories. There are 80,928 confirmed cases of COVID-19 in mainland China and 3,245 deaths. Quote, the question is, what will happen if there's a second wave, because the kind of measures that China has implemented are not necessarily sustainable in the long term, end quote, said Ben Cowling, head of the Division of Epidemiology and Biostatistics at Hong Kong's University School of Public Health. This is according to the New York Times. Number 9, Census Bureau halts 2020 count over health concerns. The U.S. Census Bureau on Wednesday announced that it was suspending its 2020 count a week after it began due to concerns for workers' health during the coronavirus pandemic. Field operations will shut down for 2 weeks, Census Bureau officials said. So far, 11 million households have filled out questionnaires dropped off by census workers. The Census Bureau has plans to hire up to 500,000 workers. Only 31,000 were on the payroll at the time of the shutdown, which census historian Margot Anderson said was unprecedented. Quote, "I don't think I've ever heard of such a suspension nationwide," end quote, said Anderson, a history professor at the University of Wisconsin, Milwaukee. Quote, "We're in uncharted territory on the census, as well as everything else since last Friday," end quote. This is according to the Associated Press. Number 10, CDC. Half of U.S. coronavirus patients in intensive care are under age 65. Older Americans are still at greater risk of death from the new COVID-19 coronavirus, but 38% of the U.S. patients known to have been hospitalized for COVID-19 were between the age of 20 and 54, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention reported Wednesday. Nearly half of those admitted to intensive care units were adults under 65. The report covered 508 of the first 2,449 coronavirus patients in the U.S. The high rate of hospitalization for younger adults matches the statistics reported from France and Italy. Of the 2,449 patients examined, 6% were 85 and older. 25% were 65 to 84. 29% were 20 to 44, and 5% were 19 and younger, the CDC said. People 20 to 44, the millennial generation, accounted for 20% of those hospitalized and 12% of ICU patients. This is according to the New York Times. That's 10 things you need to know today for Thursday, March 19th, 2020. Looking pretty grim out there. Take care of yourselves. This has been What Makes You Smarter. If you'd like to tell your story, I encourage you to check out my other podcast, What Makes You Famous. Find it everywhere using the hashtag What Makes You Famous. It's Keys Dan, RadioWhat.com, DJLittleRock.com. Peace. I'm out of here. If you like what you hear, I encourage you to follow What Makes You Smarter on social media. Find it on Facebook at What Makes You Smarter, Instagram at What Makes You Smarter, Twitter at Smarter What, and YouTube. Username Keys Dan. Leave What Makes You Smarter podcast a review and subscribe. Listen to What Makes You Smarter podcast on Spotify, iTunes, YouTube, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, and Podcast Addict. My personal favorite, learn with me on my podcast, What Makes You Smarter. And if you'd like to tell your story, I encourage you to check out my other podcast, What Makes You Famous. Find it everywhere using the hashtag What Makes You Famous. Call 501-470-6386 and leave a message to set up a time for What Makes You Famous. Support What Makes You Smarter podcast using the PayPal, paypal.me/Keys Dan. Email info@radiowhat.com. What Makes You Smarter is a production of Keys Dan Enterprises Incorporated at keysdan.com. Thank you for listening. Thank you for listening. Thank you for